Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back. Let's start with our usual 5 minutes of calming meditation, and also be sure to set your motivation, a very positive motivation for doing the class. And then we'll begin. So set up your posture and be sure you're relaxing your body. And then do some focusing on your breath. Okay, so I wanted to start off today with some review from yesterday and even last week. I'm not going to go through the whole description of the Wheel of Life that Venerable Lexok went over with us yesterday, but I do want to emphasize two parts that he was particularly showing us in those 12 links. So the outer circle, the 12 links. And the first like 3 links that talk about ignorance, karma, and consciousness, this is the first seed or the first causal factors that plant the seed for us to be reborn again in samsara. And then the other 2 in particular links of craving and grasping are the 2 links that make that seed that was planted in those first 3 links actually ripen, okay, into another rebirth. So when we start to talk about how to interrupt that cycle, how to get free, to get liberated from the cycle of constantly being reborn again and again, we can do it in either place. Okay, we can interrupt it at the level of the original ignorance. Okay, we can stop perpetuating that ignorance, or we can stop at the point where the great craving and grasping ripen the seed. Okay, because if we don't have the craving and grasping, then the seed that was planted will not be ripened into another rebirth. And the main way in which we stop both of these from happening is through this meditation that we talked about on Friday, through this selflessness. Okay, so if ignorance is, you know, the main factor for the first 3, the ignorance that misperceives things, that sees ourselves and all of our reality as somehow independently existent. And like Venerable Lexok said, independent of causes and conditions, independent of parts, and independent of labeling by the mind. If we can start to see that that we ourselves and our external reality exist as a dependent arising, as a, you know, as a combination of all these different things, then we start to break apart that sense of separateness that creates us, that makes us do the negative actions that lead to us creating the causes to continue to be reborn again and again. And we talked a lot about how the process of attachment and anger, so the craving and the grasping, like he said, the craving can be related to attachment in the sense that I perceive something as giving me a good feeling, and I believe that it exists, you know, externally as the source of the good feeling, the source of the happiness is in the thing, instead of recognizing that it is a dependent arising of my own mind. And if I can start to see how that process works and stop it at the beginning, where we start to see that that things don't exist separately from ourselves, from our minds, that ourselves are much bigger than that, then we can stop the development of that attachment, that craving, that grasping. And craving can also be anger, in the sense of we crave to have, let's say, a comfortable experience, or we crave to have a non-harming experience. So we think that we have to push people and situations away from us in order to be happy. So there's a craving and a grasping there as well. It's not just attachment. Okay, so let's do some review. So developing this sense of selflessness, and another reason why we often talk about the meditation on selflessness being an antidote to the ignorance and an antidote to the craving and grasping, is that when we start to see that we are much more connected already to things, that our very existence is connected to all these, you know, to everything, you know, in so many ways, then we stop seeing ourselves as so separate from things, which again creates the problems. Okay, so to review, last week we talked about this meditation that we do on the 4-point analysis, which is um, the meditation on selflessness. The other reason that we do meditation on selflessness is because it's much easier to see the emptiness of the self than it is to see the emptiness of a table or the emptiness of our external things. They seem so much more concrete than a self. A self is pretty, more elusive in some ways. So one thing we have to remember when we're doing this meditation on selflessness and the Buddhist idea of selflessness is that we have two aspects of the self, okay? We have the conventional self, which is the self that exists, okay? So when we're talking about selflessness in Buddhism, we aren't saying that there is no such thing, that there's non-existence of the self, okay? We're not saying that there is no self in that sense. We're saying that there's not a certain type of self, okay? So we start looking for the emptiness of the self, in the sense that the self does not exist in the way that it appears, okay? So we talked about the conventional existence of the cup. The fact that the conventional existence of the cup is the fact that there is a cup here and that I can drink from it. And when I start talking about its ultimate existence, I'm talking about the fact that from the side of the cup, there's no such thing as cupness, okay? And there's no independently separate existent cup, okay? That doesn't exist as in the way that it appears. It appears independent. It appears independent from my mind labeling it. But when I start to analyze and go deeply, I see that in fact, the cup does not exist in that way. In fact, my mind is necessary to label it a cup in order for it to exist as a cup, in order for me to see it as a cup, in order for me to drink, okay? So when we're talking about a self, the first step is this object of negation. So the object of negation is the self that doesn't exist, okay? In the sense that in order to get a view of the object of negation, we have to create or encourage or remember the experience of this self that doesn't exist. So what we do is we visualize, we remember a situation in which that really strong, concrete sense of self appeared to us, okay? So we have to, it doesn't always exist because usually if we're just walking and talking and showering and we aren't particularly triggered, then we don't necessarily have a sense of that self. Okay, all we have is the self that exists, which is just like I'm eating, I'm sleeping, I'm walking, which is a self that exists. It's only when we trigger it emotionally, like let's say we get rejected in a relationship. Okay, so we remember what it was like to have someone reject us. And then we start to explore, okay, all these really strong feelings of hurt, maybe some embarrassment, maybe, uh, like disappointment, these kinds of things start coming up. Well, then we have to examine, okay, now how am I viewing me at that moment? Am I viewing me as having some kind of a real existence that is beyond simply the self that walks and the self that talks? Usually it comes up much more strongly, okay, as a more powerful me, okay? When we're blamed for something we didn't do, right? I didn't do it. That's usually our experience of it. It's not, I didn't do it. My body and mind didn't do it, right? It's I didn't do it. So our experience of ourself becomes much stronger, much more concrete. And so that's the self that is the object of negation. That's the self that we're trying to prove does not exist, even though we experience it so strongly when we're in an emotional situation. Or another one is when we achieve something very great, when we land a job, or when we, get a really good grade on a test, or when we win at some kind of a sporting event, okay? Who is it? We have to examine, who am I saying actually did this activity, actually achieved this, okay? It's not simply a body and mind, or a regular old self. It's now me, like with a capital M, it's the I that did it, okay? And that becomes our object of negation. Now, the second one we talk about is, now we have to agree on the reasoning. So if that strong experience of an I actually existed in the way that we believe it does, we should be able to find it beyond the body and mind, because we have an experience as if it exists more than just my mind, okay? Usually when we have that feeling of a self, we don't think it's just my thoughts, right? Because what is a thought? A thought is barely there, isn't it? It comes and it goes, doesn't it? But my sense of a self is much bigger than that. My experience of it is much bigger. So we have to say, okay, I look in my body, is that strong experience, is it in my body? And I do that as my meditation. Or do I actually experience myself as somehow owning this body? That there's a sense of a self that is separate but interdependent, again, with the body. It's over here, and it's right behind our eyes, and it's like a totem, it's like right here. This is the me that is hurt. This is the me that, that did really well, right? It's not just a body and mind, it's something more than that. So we have to agree that if I can't find that self in the body and mind, then it doesn't exist. And that's the reasoning that we have to agree on. And we do this meditation. Oh, and so then we start looking for it. Okay, where is that self? Okay, it's not in my body. My body's a physical thing, and my experience of a self is a mental thing. So then I start looking in my mind. Is it in my mind? Is it my thoughts? Well, it's not just my thoughts, right? Is it my feelings? Well, it's my thoughts and my feelings. So where is that self? Okay, and we start to see that it's actually something that we have made up. We've taken this self, which does exist, like the cup, right? And we've turned it into something bigger, something more than it actually is. So as the way a self actually exists is what we call a mere label, a label on a body and mind. So I have the label Drolma on the body and mind, and that's the self that exists, okay? Because I have to be able to say, I go here, I go there. We have to have a self. It's when we start giving it, more elaborating on it, exaggerating on it, that it starts to cause us problems. Because then we give it independent existence. Then we stop seeing the fact that it's connected. We stop seeing the fact that it is constantly changing and that it has parts. I mean, when you say, I am so hurt, okay, when you say that, do you mean the I that was the self that was present when the person broke up with you? Or do you mean the I that is existent now? Or do you mean the I that's going to be existent in the future? Because you've got these three different I's, right? And they're not the same. They have changed. But we say, no, no, no. There's a self. There's a me that runs through all of these and somehow is myself, right? And that's what is hurt. But in fact, we don't exist that way. When we start to analyze more closely, we're a dependent arising. We're made up of parts. We're made up of a past self, a present self, a future self, okay? So the more we can get used to this idea, the less we're gonna get caught. Like when someone insults us or someone criticizes us, it's like, okay, who are you criticizing? Right? Who are you criticizing? Where is that somehow me that is such a bad me? Or when we make mistakes, okay? And we're not condoning behavior, and we're not saying we can't learn and become better people at all. In fact, we do grow, and hopefully we get better, okay? But what we're saying is that there's not some kind of a self that runs through all these experiences that is somehow separate from them. That's not who we are. We're so much more. We're so much more connected. We're connected to others. We're connected to our environment. We're connected, you know, we also have this Buddha nature. We have this potential to become so much more. Okay. So then when we start to talk about what we're going to talk about today is bodhicitta. But the first aspect when we're, so, okay, hold on. So now, okay, when we start talking about bodhicitta, they're saying, okay, don't pay any attention to yourself and focus only on others, right? But that is unreasonable, isn't it? Because we don't want to get rid of the conventional self that exists. That has to continue, right? We have to be able to function in the world. We have to have boundaries. We have to take care of our needs. And they say bodhisattvas have to have a lot of self-confidence in order to be willing to take on the suffering, in order to do what is needed to lead all beings to enlightenment. For us even to want to get to enlightenment in order to benefit all beings, there has to be a me, okay? So then how do we balance this? How do we see that our self is not so exaggerated and at the same time have a sense of self that does exist, okay? And so one of the things that often happens in modern society is that we get an identity. We start doing this cognitive fusion thing, okay? And we get an identity that is very connected to our mistakes or our bad actions or our you know, we put ourselves down, okay? So we through either through parenting or through advertising. I mean, advertising, the consistent message that we get from advertising is that we are not okay as we are, that we have to buy this service, we have to buy this thing, we have to, you know, be like the people in movies who are painted up to look perfect, who have perfect lives that are solved, you know, all their problems are solved in a half hour or something, you know, that this whole, you know, the media creates this whole mystique of who we're supposed to be, that then we think, well, if I'm not that, then I'm not okay. And there's never this sense of just, you're fine the way you are. Nobody ever teaches you that. Nobody says that the way you are is perfectly fine, right? It's always you have to be something else, right? You have to be better. And even Buddhism can fall in that trap if we aren't careful. We can get very you know, focused on changing and becoming something, when in fact what we're talking about more is like a flower. Okay, we're all flowers in the sense that we have to be nurtured in order to grow. And this is actually from Rogers, Carl Rogers, I'm pretty sure, Carl Rogers, Humanistic Psychology. But his sense of what the self was this, you know, a plant that in order for it to bloom, you can't squeeze it into blooming, and you can't yell at it and beat it into blooming. You actually have to nurture it. You have to provide good conditions. And if you provide good conditions, if you are kind, if you are gentle, if you are nurturing, you give it warmth, you give it sunlight, you give it water, well, then it blooms. And that's actually who we are and how it works for us as well. Because we have this seed within us, it's called our Buddha nature, our Buddha potential, which is free of all the negativity, free of all the mistakes, and it wants to grow. It's our, you know, it's just naturally who we are. Our ability to become, you know, the Buddhas is already in us, and it's a matter of nurturing it. But so often I think we really beat ourselves up because we think we're already supposed to be perfect. And yeah, so I have a couple quotes here. Let's look at these. So Louise Hay is a psychologist who works particularly in the area of self-esteem. So she says, remember, you have been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens. And then Jack Kornfield says, when we struggle to change ourselves, we in fact only continue the patterns of self-judgment and aggression. We keep the war against ourselves alive. And so this really argues for this this practice of mindfulness, especially when we're working with difficult emotions, and this practice of learning to be in the present moment, learning to be accepting of whatever arises, whether it's physical sensations, whether it is mental and emotional experiences, that we start to just learn to watch them and accept them and see this is what is happening for us. This is where we are right now. And it's okay, because so long as we're accepting of it, it wants to grow, it wants to change, it wants to become. It's only when we do this contraction, you know, in this cognitive fusion that says, I am this negative emotion, I am this, you know, this past mistake, I am, you know, this person that this person rejected. You know, when we start concretizing ourselves, that we have a problem with it, that it's much harder to allow ourselves to become and grow and move through the difficulties, you know, move through the past karmic seeds that have been planted and embrace the positive experiences that start to create the positive karma and the good things in our lives. So one of the ways we do this is we practice self-compassion. So and this when the Buddha taught compassion, you know, this idea that we had to set the self out from all the others was kind of a novel idea, because most people apparently at his time, and also they talk about this in Tibet traditionally, they already had compassion for themselves. It was like a built-in thing. They didn't have this phenomena that we of modern people have, of that we're not good enough, right? That we have to be someone different in order to be loved, in order to be approved, in order to be accepted. That, you know, this whole sense of competition. When you have a sense of self that is connected to others, competition doesn't make a lot of sense, okay? Comparing myself to others doesn't make a lot of sense. Becoming who I can be makes more sense, because then I benefit everybody, because I'm connected to everybody. So this idea of self-kindness versus self-judgment. So saying kind things to ourselves. And mindfulness can really bring this up. How am I talking to myself? Okay. And in particular, when we get into difficult circumstances, especially when we're feeling really vulnerable, when we're sick, when we're you know, feeling like we're aging and we all of a sudden need a lot more support than we used to, we start putting ourselves down. We start blaming this concrete sense of self, instead of seeing that we are interconnected, that we are constantly changing. And then when we can do this mindfulness, this awareness of how we talk to ourselves, we can start to see that those self-judging statements are not based in reality. They're actually based in a view of the self that is not accurate. Okay. And that self-kindness, the nurturing, is what is going to make us be able to be more kind to ourselves, be able to benefit others, be able to actually flourish, you know, to grow, to achieve what we want to achieve, you know, to create our aspirations. Because self-judgment puts us down, it stops us. Self-kindness encourages us, helps us grow. This idea of common humanity versus isolation is the sense that when we have difficult experiences, when we go through a hard time, you know, when we have, you know, say severe depression and we, you know, thoughts of suicide, or when we make a really big mistake and we, you know, maybe we spend too much money, or when we, you know, when we hurt someone really badly and we feel we're such a horrible person. Okay, starting then, that's isolation. That's thinking I'm the only one, I'm the worst one. And common humanity is recognizing that everybody makes mistakes, that we have all been through these difficult experiences, that it's not, you know, you're not alone, right? You are not alone in these and so part of being human is part of learning from our experiences, from growing, from recognizing that. So when we start, you know, saying we're the worst and we're horrible and we're awful and, you know, we don't deserve love and we're unworthy and, you know, those kinds of things, that's like, it's doing this thing we call like reverse pride. Okay, so there's a kind of pride, the negative kind of pride, because there's a good kind of pride, but there's a negative kind of pride that says I'm better than everybody else. Okay, and when we're doing really well, we walk around thinking, well, I'm better than everybody else. And then the slightest thing doesn't go well, we make the slightest mistake, and then all of a sudden we're the very worst of everybody. You know, we don't deserve anything, we should, you know, we shouldn't be alive, we're horrible, you know, all these things. So we do this reverse, you know, pride, in the sense that now we're not like everybody else, we're worse than everybody else. So we're either better than everybody else or we're worse than everybody else. And we're never just okay, you know, like everybody makes mistakes and it's okay. And we learn from them, and that's the beauty of it. And so this idea of common humanity. And then, like I've already talked about, this mindfulness versus over-identification. Over-identification is this cognitive fusion I've been talking about. When we start to believe that we are an angry person who can never change, or we start to believe that that I messed up. Okay, I made a mistake. I yelled at my nephew, and now I think I'm a horrible person because I yelled at my nephew. And I start feeling all this embarrassment and this shame. And so what do? When I contract into thinking that I am those negative feelings, then I want to get rid of myself. I want to hurt myself in order to stop feeling that, right? Instead, mindfulness becomes an awareness that I am many, many, many feelings. I am many, many actions. I am, you know, I'm constantly changing. I have been, you know, my mind has existed since beginningless times. And those experiences that I have are also dependent arisings from the conditions that came together, not just me, right? But also, you know, what was my nephew doing that got me angry? You know, what, you know, where have I learned to respond in this way instead of responding with kindness, with compassion? So all these things that come together, and mindfulness can start to see that and open it up, and then allow for change. Okay, so let's do some breakout groups now for about 10 minutes. Oh, actually, let me go back to that. So I think we can do 50 groups. Okay, sorry about that. I got disconnected, but I'm back. Okay, so let me show you this question. Okay, so for your discussion groups, how do we balance self-compassion with acts of serving others? Okay, because this is what bodhicitta is about, isn't it? So how do we balance self-compassion with acts of serving others? So Felipe will divide you into groups, and you'll have the opportunity to talk to other people about it. And then we'll come back and we'll learn more about bodhicitta.
All right, I'm going to get started now with the groups. I'm unmuting everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm turning on my video.
Hi, Erin.
Hello,
Hi.
Erin. Hello, Drolma.
How are you all?
Great, thank you.
Where are you?
Erin, go ahead first.
I'm in Goa.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Cool. There's a couple other guys who are doing this course who are also in Goa who are stuck
Oh,
there.
really?
Oh,
Yeah.
That's so
wow.
cool. I feel like I want to recognize their backgrounds, you know?
Yeah. And where are you?
I'm Muslim. I'm Muslim. I'm Turkish, but I live in Portugal.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Very cool.
We all the group is from all over the different places in the world. It's so amazing.
It is amazing. I've met so many different people from so many different places. It's so cool.
Yes. And it's such a pleasure to have you in our group, Drolma. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I try not to talk too much because I just finished talking a lot. So you guys,
Yes, of course.
you lead the conversation and I'll,
Okay.
just jump in.
Okay.
Sure. So how do we balance self-compassion with acts of serving others? I feel like this is actually something I've been thinking about a lot lately, just in terms of maybe the question like, when is being selfish okay?
Okay.
Like, when is taking care of yourself okay? Like, I guess to better explain my thinking on it, I'm an empath and I tend to feel everyone else's feelings far too strongly, and I let it really affect my decision making. So I might make a decision that's better for someone else because I know that like they might feel hurt in the future and I want to prevent that or take that on myself, but that in the long term has a negative impact on me. So how, like, it's really hard to balance making the decision that is compassionate towards yourself while still trying to be like sensitive and caring for others, I guess.
Yes. I feel similar. I mean, like when I want to act on somebody's sadness or hurt or happiness, I need to, like, if somebody is sad, I'd like to feel I'd like to put myself in their shoes and have the compassion for them. But then I feel like if I stay myself positive and more energetic and lively, I might help them to cheer up like quicker, so overcome their
Right.
suffering quicker. So I always say, like, I need to charge my batteries, so to be able to plug on them to charge them as well. So
Sure. That's a good one.
and sometimes, yeah, as you said, sometimes it can be hard. Like sometimes you need to you want to be as sad as them and take their suffering to yourself so they can overcome it quicker as well. Or just
Right.
take, okay, I'll do it, you don't worry about it. Okay, like taking more
Do you
responsibility.
feel like you have a hard time like maybe removing yourself from a situation that you know isn't serving you because you're trying to be helpful? Does that make sense?
Yes, it happens a lot, especially with the close friends. They are suffering, and it seems like if I put myself in their environment, it will put me down as well, and I won't be able to help them. Like if I'm in that circle, like I need to step out from there to be able to see it from outside. So
Right.
but sometimes it might look that I'm isolating, I'm ignoring, not less caring, but like I know in my heart that I will be more beneficial to them if I do this. Like if I'm in the same circle of that feeling, I won't be able to help. But sometimes it's hard to balance this. It's sometimes you're in that circle already, so like it's hard to balance it. And for me, sometimes I just say what's in my mind, or I just do what's in my heart, like action on it without thinking. That is what I'm trying to be more mindful and be present. That is what I'm working on myself more.
Yeah, I sometimes feel like I'm rejecting others because I have to take time for myself. But if I don't take time for myself, then I can't be of benefit to others. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
How do
I
you
don't,
communicate that with other people?
yeah. Yeah, sometimes I have to be honest about that I don't have the capacity. Like I wish I
Mhm.
could, you know, I really wish I could, but I just don't have, and it's a little like admitting that I'm not perfect, you know, in some ways, and sometimes that's hard,
Mhm.
you know,
Yes.
just,
Or you can't do everything. That's how
right.
I always
Yeah.
feel like I should be able to, but I sometimes have to admit that I can't.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It seems to be hard for a lot of people to admit that they can't do it or say no. I think it's learning as well to be able to say no, I cannot do it, but I know somebody else can do it. Like this is what I do mostly. I reconnect people who can benefit to each other. That's something that I think I do naturally. Like if or like I don't have time, but you know, if you go to this direction, maybe you can get the help or the advice that you're looking for.
Mm,
Uh,
mm.
but yeah.
Well, how, I guess, Venerable, this is probably more a question for you specifically, but like, how would you define or explain like the concept of selfishness, like through a Buddhist lens? And I don't necessarily mean like I'm being selfish, like I'm going to have the last cookie, but like, I find myself constantly asking myself, like, when is being selfish okay?
Yeah.
Selfish in considering that someone else might think my action is selfish, but I know that I'm taking care of myself by
Right.
ending a relationship or not, blah, 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 whatever it may be.
Right.
But if there
Right.
is no self, can you be selfish or not selfish?
Yeah, well, so like I was just saying, there is a self, okay? It's not that there is no self. When we talk about no
Right,
self, there is a self. Um,
right.
so, and we have to have an I in order to function. We have to have an I.
Mhm.
It's, yeah. And so when we talk about the self as being much more connected to others and much wider than just this exaggerated sense of self, then when we take care of this particular body or this particular mind, then we're doing it so that we can be of benefit to everyone. So
Okay.
then, yeah, so then that duality between self and other starts to go away, and we start to see that I want suffering to stop. Sometimes I have to take care of this suffering, sometimes I can take care of that suffering, but either way
Okay.
it's taking care of suffering. And
Sure.
if I take care of this suffering, the more I take care of this suffering and, you know, become stronger, become healthier, the better I am to be able to take care of more suffering for others in the future.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the whole bodhicitta kind of thing.
That really makes like the word selfish almost seem selfless, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like when you phrase it that way, you really
Yeah.
are doing, like, you're caring for more by being able to care for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good explanation.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was
Thank
very
you.
nice
Nice meeting
to
both of
Thank
you.
you.
and you
Nice
too,
to meet
and you
you.
too. Hope to meet you in person soon.
Yes, I hope so too.
Absolutely. I can't
Okay.
wait to get up there.
Yeah.
And me too. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get started again. A few more people may still be joining. Sometimes we lose people on breakout groups and then it takes them a little while to get back. But I want to move now from into more of a focus. So I'm going to do a little bit of review on what bodhicitta is. So had a really nice actually breakout group conversation, and I want to share. There was a question about selfishness, and what I was talking about, and I think what happens with bodhisattvas is that this duality between self and other, this idea that somehow there's a me that is over here and all the others that exist all out there, starts to break down, in the sense that as I start to see that under analysis, that I am much more connected to others than I usually think, then I am better able to see that when I take care of this body or this mind, I'm benefiting others. I'm doing it so that I can be better able to benefit others. That there isn't this huge separation between taking care of me and taking care of others. Now, of course, when we see ourselves as disconnected, as independent, as this concretizing, then selfishness becomes only about me. And we'll talk about more tomorrow about the disadvantages of that. But when we start to see this self as much more connected to others, then when I take care of this body or this mind, it becomes so that I can get rid of suffering, my suffering and everybody else's suffering. So when we talk about bodhicitta, this idea of benefiting others, the wish to become the best we can be in order to benefit others, it has these aspects of it, and this is just part of it. So bodhicitta is first and foremost a wish. It's an aspiration, okay? And it's a wish that suffering be removed in everybody, okay? That all of our suffering be removed, that we awaken to our full potential, that we become Buddhas. So this is the aspiration, this is the wish. And then what is the best way to do this? What is the best way that I can actually bring myself and all beings to this enlightenment? And it's by becoming enlightened, okay? So the first thing that we talk about is the sense of a warm heart. So this heart that cares deeply for others, that wants others to be happy. And then this wish for others to have ultimate satisfaction. And so then ultimate satisfaction is not necessarily dependent on external things. Remember, we've been talking about this lasting happiness being more of an internal experience. And it recognizes that all beings have this potential within them. And then it's a commitment to develop ourselves for others. Okay, so this is the attitude that we're trying to develop. Let me stop sharing. Just a second. And it's not easy, of course. I mean, because we're coming from a place where I have to take care of me first. I'm the center of the universe. And we start to move out from that, don't we? We start to move to, our family and our friends and, a little bit further. And then we learn to expand it even further and further and further. So it becomes more of the way we actually exist, which is connected to all beings. And so one of the ways that we can start to develop this view, this attitude, where the most important thing in our lives becomes becoming enlightened, developing ourselves spiritually so that we can bring all beings to their full enlightenment, is by starting to hold others dear. So have a positive feeling toward all beings, not just our friends and family, but also the people we don't know very well, you know, all the people. And, you know, I really feel like this pandemic, if we're, you know, reading a lot of the news, they're always saying all the numbers, you know, all the, how many people are sick and how many people are dying. And I feel like my compassion for even those strangers is really increasing. You know, it's really because I see it, you know, and it's so huge and it's so kind of in our face right now, you know, because people die from diseases all the time, but we don't, in the news, it's not like this many are sick and this many are, you know, have died. It's much more like in our face and it's hard to ignore. And I feel like I have huge compassion for them. And then, you know, all the you know, they're bringing up all the medical workers who are putting themselves at risk, you know, to, in order to try to deal with this, you know, this huge disease. So we have this, you know, it's very, you know, it's a crisis, it's difficult, but at the same time, it's a huge opportunity for developing compassion for someone beyond just our, you know, family. Because of course we have love and compassion for our family and friends. And we're not saying don't have that. What we're saying is bring everybody else up to that level. And love doesn't run out, you know, compassion doesn't run out. If you give this much love to your family, it doesn't mean you don't have any to give to other people, right? The heart is big. It is huge, and it can be as big as you want it to be, right? It can, I mean, that's why they say it can be developed limitlessly. Buddhas have unconditional, infinite love. Yeah, and so that's what we're trying to do. We're expanding that. Okay, so one way we do this is something called a 7-point cause and effect. So the first point, seeing all beings as having been one's mother. So this is again based on the Buddhist view that the mind is beginningless and endless, which means that we have had infinite opportunities to be born as a human, okay, or as an animal from the womb, like Venerable Lexo talked about yesterday. The different ways we can be born. So we've been humans, we've been animals, we've been everything, right? Many, many times. And so we have also had mothers in many of those lives. And other beings have had to be our mothers. So the chances of when you point to someone, you cannot definitely say that they have not been your mother in a past life. So when we start to look at our relationship, and we don't have to use mother, okay? We can use caretaker, we can use father. They usually use mother because many people have, especially when you're younger, you have a really close relationship with your mom. And she's like the one that who has sacrificed for you. You know, she carried you in her womb. You know, she fed you, protected you, cleaned your bottom, cleaned your spit up, you know, I mean, stayed awake all night, you know, I mean, mothers do an amazing amount of work to make sure that we survive. And the only reason that we don't recognize each individual person as having been our mother is because they look different now, right? They are in a different body, but they've actually been our mother. So this is something we get to meditate on and consider, okay, if, you know, if past and future lives are true, you know, if the mind is beginningless, then my relationship to all these other beings is much closer than I currently see it as or experiencing it as. And then we remember their kindness. In order to have been our mother, they had to have been very kind to us, right? Even, you know, you can think about the mother of this life, you know, who stayed up all night to feed, you know, or would wake up at odd hours to feed us, or the dad who got up and, you know, heated up the bottle, you know, like whoever it is. Remembering how kind they were and how we couldn't have survived without them, very clear. And then this wish to repay the kindness. When we start talking about all sentient beings as having been our mother, and not just human beings, but also insects and animals, then we start to hold them dear, and we don't want them to suffer. If we can do anything to stop their suffering, then we would do it, like we would do for the mother of this life. If there was anything we could do to make her happy, we would do it, right? And as we get older, we feel even more responsibility for making our parents happy, for making sure that they're in their old age, they're taken care of because they took care of us. But now we start to expand this, that all beings have done this for us. It's not just the parents of this life. So then our heart grows, right? Then we develop great love for all beings, holding them dear. You have been my mother. I love you. I wish to, take care of you. And great compassion. When we hold someone dear, we don't want them to suffer. So we have compassion for them. And then the third one, the supreme thought of taking responsibility, is this decision that we are going to do whatever it takes to remove their suffering. Okay, so it isn't just that I wish you didn't suffer. I wish that your suffering was done, but it's also now I am going to take the additional step to develop myself, to become the very best being that I can be, so that I can be of greatest benefit to all beings. Okay, and that's becoming a Buddha. A Buddha is they're omniscient, right? They know what we need. They're there as soon as we create the causes for them to be there and benefit us. They are there. They teach the Dharma, right? They teach, all the stuff that I'm teaching. I didn't make it up, right? It came from somebody. I mean, it came from, Buddha Shakyamuni, who was so kind to come to this earth and teach us the way that he figured it out. And so then if I could be like that Buddha, that would be awesome. If I could, teach. Okay. And then bodhicitta, the aspiration, the wish to become enlightened, to benefit all beings. Okay. Let's see. Do I have another one? Nope, that's it. Okay. So let's do some questions. If you have some questions, you can type some of those. Yeah, we'll do a few of those, and then we'll do the meditation on this.
All right, I'll start with Sarah. You can now ask your question.
Hi. So I was wondering, because we were talking earlier about the sort of self-compassion, and that we should see ourselves as flowers who need to have time to grow. So, like, on the one hand, I feel like, because we also talked about the precious short human life, and there's this kind of urgency to develop spiritually. But on the one hand, like, we also need to learn to accept ourselves as we are before we can even progress. So how can we do that without forcing it? And on the same time thinking that, that life is short and we should do something about it.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, isn't it? One thing when we're talking about the context of a precious human life is when we're talking about being attached to useless activities. Okay, so accepting where we are and working with our our conditions that we have right now is not necessarily can be done without engaging in useless activities. Okay, now sometimes if we have addiction to these things, or if we have a real like we can't stop them, then we may need to accept that that's where we are right now, and still have an aspiration to move beyond them. Okay, but yeah, I guess there really is this balance. It's not that we have to necessarily put pressure on ourselves, but we do have to grow our awareness of, are these activities really making us happy, right? So it's the urgency becomes about being aware of what is really enjoyment. What do I really believe is giving me pleasure here? Is this really benefiting me? So the urgency comes in applying awareness and mindfulness to our activities, while still being accepting of who we are. Yeah, I hope that helped.
So like with, say, bad habits, that you kind of know are bad for you, say like you're smoking or something like that,
yeah.
Like you just kind of give yourself time and just have the aspiration and not pressure yourself too much.
Right. And when you're doing it, you commit to being aware of what the experience of it. Okay. So like watching a lot of movies. Okay. So I have a problem like with watching a lot of movies. And so what I would do is I would be aware, well, I'm enjoying this, but I'm also not enjoying this, right? Because it ends. One thing, they always end, and then you want another one, and then it ends, and then you want another one, right? And that's like not a comfortable feeling. Okay. And then what else could I be doing? How am I wasting my time? With cigarettes, it's like, how am I wasting my money? And what could I be doing with this money? Even while you're letting yourself smoke, you're also aware of both sides of it, because if habits and they're attachments and they exaggerate the positives. So if we can be aware of the negative sides at the same time as we are allowing ourselves to do it, it starts to drop off. It really does. You start to, you like, for me, I start watching and I'm like, this doesn't feel good anymore, right? This just doesn't have the attraction anymore. It just starts to be like, I'd really rather put a little boundary on this. It really would make me happier if I put some boundary on this. And then I want to, right? Then it becomes more habit to want to stop doing it than it does to want to continue to do it. But yes, it takes time, it takes acceptance, it takes gentleness, and it takes permission to do it until you don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I feel for you. I know. Another question? Yeah.
Yeah, there's someone who just wants you to share the slide that was just preceding the 7-point cause explanation.
Okay, the one about bodhicitta?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay.
So before that one.
This one?
No, yeah, oh, that one, yeah.
Okay.
There you go. That's for Francesca. Okay, so hopefully that's done.
Okay.
So next I will unmute. Oh, there's Francesca. The next one, please, someone else.
The next one.
Someone else wants to see the next one again.
The next slide. Okay, everybody good with that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because this will be available on Google Drive after the course, like on Saturday or Sunday this week. Okay. So this is 7-point cause and effect, seeing all beings as having been one's mother, remembering their kindness, and then wishing to repay that kindness. I love that picture.
That's very nice picture.
It is cute.
All right. So should we go to a question then?
Yeah. Yeah, we got
Okay,
time
so
for a few more.
let's go to Shmuel. You can now ask your question. Oh, it didn't work, the muting. One sec.
Okay.
There we go.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I have a question. So a common argument that that is supposed to prevent us to fall into nihilism is that it's obvious that things exist. We see cups even though we can't find cupness. Is that correct?
Yes.
So this doesn't seem like a valid argument to me because not everything we see and perceive actually exists.
Okay, I guess I was on cupness. Everything we see and perceive does not necessarily exist.
Yeah.
Do you mean the things that we make up in our minds, that they don't exist?
For example, I would think of optical illusion.
Okay.
We think we see an optical illusion, but it doesn't actually exist. Like if we see a mirage.
Yeah.
So,
Well, no, it does exist. Okay. So when we see a mirage, it looks like water.
mhm.
It isn't actually water, but the mirage is there, isn't it? The appearance of water is there.
I would say the perception of a mirage is of water is there, but the water is not there.
Right. So, but you do have the elements coming together where you have the reflection and you have the, you know, the whatever, the heat, the waves of the heat that looks like water. So that exists,
Yes,
but the water doesn't.
right.
So that's what we're talking about, how even things don't exist in the way they appear, they still do exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a mirror, okay? So you can
Mm-hmm.
have the mirror exists, but when you have a reflection of a face in the mirror, the face that you see doesn't exist as an actual face, but the reflection is there.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could start to say, oh, there's no face, there's no mirror, it's all made up, right? And that would be nihilism,
Mm-hmm.
okay? But just saying there's not a real face, that's emptiness.
Mm. Okay, thank you.
Sir,
Can I ask another question?
yes, we have time.
It's very similar. So another thing that you said is that we have a self, because if we had no self, then we couldn't say, I go here, I go there. Is
Right,
that correct?
yes.
So a contra argument, like it doesn't seem a valid argument because not everything we say is valid. We say many things and many of them are just not valid. So how can this be a valid reason?
Well, when I say I go there, I go here, I'm actually talking about the fact that my body is moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what
Yeah.
I'm referring to. I'm not just using words. The words are referring to something, aren't they?
So why cannot it be that the body is there, the mind is there, but the self is not? We just have a body and the mind, that's all that exists without a
Right,
self. Why
right.
can't why?
Very good. So because why do we have the word self? Okay. We have to have this a word. We do have, no, we don't have to necessarily, but we do have the word self that refers to this body and mind. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's why we can use this language of myself, my mind, this sort of thing. Okay. So we do have the words. We wouldn't, if there was nothing that, if we had no conception or nothing existed that was the unity of these two, right? Then we wouldn't even have the word self. Body would go, mind would think. Okay. So what we're saying is because we have labeled it in this way, therefore it exists. I have a
Why?
label. Okay, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Why does it follow that if you have a word for something, then a referent should exist? I don't see the logic.
Well, it's not that it should, because we have words that don't have reference. It's the fact that the word, the label, and the basis for the object being labeled both exist. We have both parts, and you have to have both parts in order for something to exist.
Well, I admit that this specific argument, I still don't follow it.
Okay.
Why?
Okay, so I'm going to refer you to a book, How to See Yourself as You Really Are by the Dalai Lama. And he explains it really much more fully, and yeah. And Felipe will type that up in the chat. How to See Yourself as You Really Are. It's an excellent, excellent book on selflessness.
Okay, great.
Yes, thank you for your questions. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's do some meditation.
Okay, first of all, can you hear me well? Because I'm trying a new microphone. Does it work well?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. And let's carry on. So everyone, please go back to your comfortable position and bring your body to a nice and relaxed state. Take a moment to settle down, having your back loosely straight, allowing the bell to bring you into the space of the body first. And take a couple of minutes to settle down, as we've done before many times already. Allowing the body to go back to its natural state by simply releasing all the tension in the body, letting go of all tightness. Letting go of any worries or concerns that might be present in the mind. So allowing body and mind to become relaxed, stable, balanced. And from this state of calmness, to start with this meditation, now letting go of observing the body, try to first give rise to a sense that all sentient beings are the same as you in wanting to be happy and free of suffering. And extend that thought out to all beings. All of us are the same in wanting happiness. So with that in mind, we start with the first point, understanding that all sentient beings have been our mother. Allow your mind to move around, and whoever it comes to the mind, whether an individual or a group of people, understand that each one of them has been your mother. Every single one of them has been your mother, not once, but countless times. And then we move on to the second point, which is recognizing their kindness. So now you can clearly imagine your mother of this life, or if you feel more connected to another caregiver, you can visualize that person. And begin by thinking how our mother did so much for us, carried us in her body for 9 months, then gave birth to us, which is something very painful. Our mother, our caregiver, endured a lot of hardships just to give us the life that we have now. Think how, as a baby, your mother protected you from the cold. She helped you when you couldn't walk, when you couldn't chew your food. Think about the countless times that she got up in the middle of the night to feed you, even though she was sleep deprived. She would watch you carefully so you wouldn't put something in your mouth and choke. She kept your body clean, made sure you didn't hurt yourself in any way. She dressed you, washed you. She taught you how to behave, how to become a part of society, encouraged you to learn, to do your homework. Take a moment to recall all the times your mother or caregiver was there for you. Even as young adults, we receive so much care, so much attention from our mother. So really take a moment to recall that and appreciate it. All the love and care that you've received from this one special being. And now extend this feeling to all beings, understanding that they have been our mothers in countless times. They've all provided us with measureless happiness, protected us from harm. Without these all beings, we couldn't have survived. Each one of them have been your mother infinite times. Now thinking, wow, all of these beings have been so kind to me. Then we go to the third point, is wishing to repay their kindness. So now that we see that everything we have is because of others, acknowledging the kindness that others have shown us, we generate a strong sense of gratitude, knowing how all beings have been so kind to us. Automatically, we would want to return that love back. So develop a strong wish to repay all of sentient beings for everything they have done for us. And let your mind just rest in the feeling of wishing to repay their kindness. And then generating great love. From this sense of gratitude, allow a sense of closeness, of pure love to arise. A warmth seeing all sentient beings endearing and close to you. Allow your heart to open up and to embrace all of them. Perceiving all beings in a beautiful, glowing way, just like a mother would see her child, giving rise to the thought, how wonderful it would be if all these beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. Really wish that. And then the next point, generating great compassion. Give rise to a caring attitude that wants all sentient beings to be free from suffering, acknowledging how they are stuck in the darkness of ignorance, swept away in the ocean of samsara. Contemplate the suffering of beings, how they struggle, just as if you've seen your mother of this life struggle like that. Arouse the wish that each and every sentient being were free from suffering and all of its causes. Opening up your heart to all sentient beings in the same way that a mother would feel when she sees her only child in pain, immediately wishing to remove that suffering. And then moving on to the next point, generating a special attitude. So think, I don't just want them to have pleasure. I want all sentient beings to have lasting happiness, genuine happiness. And if I want them to be happy, then I myself really need to look after them. It's like being in a position where you can save a person from falling off a cliff. Immediately a sense of responsibility would arise. We have to do this. We have to save that person. So extend that same feeling, that same drive to help everyone towards all sentient beings. Thinking no matter what it takes, I myself will liberate all sentient beings from samsara by myself alone. And the final point, giving rise to the supreme mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta. Having developed a superior intention, wanting to free all sentient beings by ourselves, ask yourself, at this moment, am I really capable to achieve this goal and eliminate all the suffering of all sentient beings and bring them all to everlasting happiness? At this moment, am I able to bring even one sentient being to that state? How can I possibly do that? How can I make it come true? Then come to the understanding that we will only be able to free all sentient beings from suffering and lead them to Buddhahood if first we ourselves become enlightened. Therefore, make a strong determination. No matter what, I will obtain the peerless and perfect state of enlightenment in order to be beneficial towards all sentient beings. Slowly and gently coming out of the meditation, bring your attention again to your body, to your surroundings. Now we go into the dedication. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, and those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be free from their ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain, to dispel the mysteries of the world. Maybe so. All right.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And just to let you know, tomorrow after this class, we'll do an extra hour of Q&A. So we'll do a regular class for an hour and a half, and then we'll have like a 5-minute break, and then we'll do an hour of just questions. So you're welcome to stay, or, you know, just to let you know that's what's going to happen tomorrow evening, or tomorrow evening. It's evening for us, but tomorrow for you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Venerable. Bye.